TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
Hello, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to this week's TellyCast. On this week's show, my guests are Lucy Smith, Director of MIPTV and now MIPCOM at Reed Midem, clinical psychologist and leadership coach Merete Wedell-Wedellsborg, and wellbeing coach Tracy Forsyth. It's all coming up on this week's TellyCast. This week's show is sponsored by MIPTV, who passionately create and share content for the experienced generation. Channel provider, content producer, distributor and format seller, MIPTV delivers real-world stories about the adventures, cultural trends and social causes that resonate with today's millennial and Gen Z audiences. Based upon and inspired by social media trends and influencers, MIPTV operates and distributes a flagship lifestyle channel in vivid 4K UHD HDR quality to 315 million homes in 46 countries via linear cable platforms, digital smart TVs, OTT services and via watchinsight.tv. It also distributes a mobile-first short-form channel in Short, action sports channel in Trouble, science and tech channel in Wonder and a nature and wildlife channel in Wild, a co-venture with Off the Fence, to fast channels and mobile services around the world. MIPTV partners with global brands and broadcasters such as Red Bull Media House, G2 Esports, Vice Media and BT Sports to create factual series like Epic Exploring, I Am Invincible and Ultimate Goal. To find out how to do great things together with MIPTV, visit insight.tv or get in touch with the team at marketing@insight.tv. My first guest this week is Danish clinical psychologist, author and executive coach Merete Wedell-Wedellsborg. Merete recently wrote a fascinating piece for Harvard Business Review entitled How to Lead When Your Team is Exhausted and You Are Too. And I featured a link to this article a couple of weeks ago in our TellyCast Plus newsletter when Channel 4 CEO Alex Marnes cited it as the inspiration for her recent open letter to employees, which was highly praised right across the TV industry. And I thought it was a rare example of real leadership in a TV industry that's perhaps not renowned for having particularly inspirational leaders. So I'm delighted to have Merete join us to discuss this and some of the issues that the article raises. Welcome to TellyCast, Merete.
Thank you so much for having me, Justin.
I gather you're pretty busy supporting business leaders from a range of different sectors right now to get through this very difficult time.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. This last year, actually, I've tried to sort of condense some of the ideas and thoughts that I heard leaders talk about during this pandemic and make them into a series of pieces for HBR covering the phases of this crisis. And the last one was called How to Lead When Your Team is Exhausted and You Are Too. And it turns out that quite a few leaders are feeling this issue right now. So this is, what I do 24/7 right now, coaching, advising leaders on how to cope with this pandemic.
We'll put a link to the actual article in the episode description, as well as a link to your website. But looking at these different challenges that you mentioned that business leaders are facing now, how are they different now to the post-COVID wave as we nearly hit a year of lockdown?
I don't think any of us will forget this first wave of COVID and how we reacted. And I think we saw something quite paradoxical. So obviously, a very serious and threatening situation, both from a health perspective and a business perspective. But when I talked to leaders, they sometimes told me, almost in a shameful way, that they were feeling really energized and fired up by the situation when this first hit us back in March and April. And there were all these stories around leaders becoming very clear, very transparent, organizations pulling together. So many of the leaders that I've been coaching, they felt full of purpose and dedication, even though the situation was extremely serious. And I mean, that was then. And now in the second or third wave, it's quite different. So news of lockdowns or extended lockdowns are met with, I mean, big sighs. And this time, I mean, the paradox is that even companies that have gotten a lot of tailwind, so people running, for example, digital businesses and also some media companies are reporting that they're feeling exhausted, even though their businesses is, going really well and even benefiting from COVID. So, I mean, I would say that the predominant emotion right now is exhaustion. We want this to be over with, and we pull ourselves out of bed in the morning, and it's really tough.
The vaccine is the one thing that's, giving us a ray of light.
Exactly.
But going back to that first few months, which I think, in many ways has changed business and a lot of businesses for good. That was maybe a bit of a fight or flight response, wasn't it? It was a case of, right, get up and let's do something about this, whatever we can do. And that's given way now to a different type of fatigue, I suppose, a bit of exhaustion to get through this unrelenting restrictions that we're facing.
Yes, that's true, Justin. So, I mean, the first time around, we were just so, filled up with fire and energy. But the thing is that the second time around, you don't necessarily become better in a crisis. And so we know this from trauma psychology that you actually don't become a better prisoner of war the second time around. However, the second time around, you have your systems in place. You are better prepared. And this will strengthen your ability to sort of get through this feeling of being tired and frustrated. You now have experience. You know how to work from home. You know how to use different kinds of Zoom and Teams and WebEx, and you know how to protect yourself and your family. And that's very different from when this hit us the first time around, where we were all sort of both fired up with energy, but also a bit confused. And it was the first time for all of us. I mean, no one had tried this before, so we were all kind of lost. So many mixed emotions.
Yeah. And we're all pandemic professionals now, aren't we?
Exactly.
I can't imagine a male leader writing the sort of empathetic, open letter to staff that Alex Mahon did.
Oh, it was impressive.
Are female leaders better equipped to show compassionate leadership, do you think?
Not necessarily. I was really impressed with Alex's letter, I'll say, also because she actually gave some quite practical pieces of advice that I really liked. When you look at countries, countries run by female heads of state, they have actually taken a more strict approach during this pandemic. I mean, approaching even stricter measures, placing bigger emphasis on prevention. And the interesting thing to your question is that, I mean, those strategies are actually not strategies of compassion. They are more strategies of containment. And I think I remember the author of this study theorizing that maybe, female leaders were prioritizing health over economic activity. So the interesting thing is that really this is a containment strategy when you lock down, when you use restrictions, and not a compassionate strategy. But I've worked with both female leaders for many years, and I have to say that I haven't found a lot of evidence that gender determines how you lead. I've seen, or I coach male leaders whose leadership style can be described as, highly emotional and maternal, and I've seen female leaders who act in very paternal ways. But I will say, though, that during this pandemic, we've also seen, I think, a lot of evidence of what you might call, structural sexism, right? That this pandemic, there's so many women who, are taking up the majority of the household chores, and so many women are leaving the labor market. Women are taking, a bigger toll on homeschooling, housework, and they have been struggling a lot with this. You've probably seen the the US Vice President Kamala Harris talk about how this is such a shock to the entire workforce, a national emergency even. So yeah, there are different burdens on men and women during all of this, but I don't think I'll call the women more compassionate during this. I've seen so many male leaders, being extremely compassionate, understanding, using so much empathy and really, talking to their employees, not only about, are you okay, but also, are you really okay?
And you talk in your piece about leaders needing psychological stamina to push through this phase, this third lockdown phase that we're in right now. Can you expand on that a little bit?
So we've talked about the reaction from the first phase and how we got energized, and that's all due to a psychological response called, it's arousal, because it's stimulating. And I had a leader who told me, so usually this will take us 3 months to do, and now it just took us 3 days, right? There was this hectic, frantic energy. And you can almost feel the rush, right? And the mind is just popping with ideas, and people are over communicating and over corresponding. So the thing is that now it's not so exciting anymore. And there has been a shift in the gallery of leaders standing out. So I'll say that in the beginning of this pandemic, we saw a lot of the action leaders, a lot of the diehard leaders standing out. But now it's a different kind of leader standing out. A leader with a taste for the long stretch and the slow burn. And the root of that reaction is psychological stamina. And stamina comes from having endured tough times and, having great conviction. So stamina is deeply related to, you need to be able to regulate yourself. So you could say that in the first phase, we were all guided by the autopilot. But the second phase, we need to, grab hold of the steering wheel. We need to refuel. We need to ignite that sense of injustice and fight. And there's a lot of energy actually in being a bit of, almost angry about this. So a bit of indignation of being, subjected to this pandemic is actually a good thing. And obviously people are starting to question, the real price of restriction. And for business leaders, this is an energy that needs to be harnessed. So a situation where, right now where we are still, under so many restrictions, we need to really pull through. And what we need there is stamina. It's grit. It's that sort of feeling of, we can pull through this, and we need a lot of power and energy to be able to do that. We can't just lie down and wait for it to be over under the duvet, even though sometimes we dream about, a day under the duvet where we eat pizza and ice cream and watch Netflix. But there's and of course you're allowed to do that for a little while, but not every time something hard will hit you.
Just going back to your piece in a bit more detail, you set out 3 ways to deal with the challenges today. Can you take us through those in turn? The first one was understanding urgency versus importance. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So there are, or at least I've found 3 ways, to fight exhaustion, because that's the feeling that I am hearing about and seeing all the time right now. So leaders are telling me that, they eat too much chocolate, they forget to exercise, they forget to drink water, they fight with their spouse at home, they are tired of their children. It's just a horror cabinet of emotions right now. So, I was looking for, so we need to look in psychology, in trauma psychology, of how can we sort of pull through this, not only, yourself, but also, as a team. So the first one I found to be really interesting, in a pandemic, is to make sure that you determine what's urgent and what's truly important. Because in a crisis, all the things we know that's important, they fade in the background. So urgent matters, they attract all the attention during a crisis. And that means that we procrastinate a little bit. We find excuses for, facing the really important issues. I mean, Justin, you wouldn't believe how many times I've heard leaders say, yeah, Merete, that's fine, but, we'll deal with that after COVID. We'll do that after COVID. Or, oh, that particular tough subject, it's not important now. And so you need to, take a good look at what are your big issues that need attention, and what would you change long term, for the better. So that was the first sort of strategy that I found to be really helpful for the teams, the top teams that I coach.
So that's almost like grasping the nettle now. It's like the easy way out is to understand what's urgent in the short term. But actually, what we should be doing is thinking much more about, what is really important to the business in terms of how can the business accelerate out of the pandemic.
Oh, yes. So thinking about that and talking about that and, having it, on your mind all the time is extremely important during this.
And the second tip that you featured in your article was balancing compassion and containment. Can you explain about that?
Yeah, so I guess any psychologist in the world will tell you that, in a crisis, you need to dial up on compassion and empathy and understanding. Listening, caring, being flexible, those are all constructive ways of, providing a psychological safe, a mental safety net even for people who feel pressured. So my point is that you should be compassionate, but you should not start to coddle people. So the best way to explain this is that you need to be both a caring parent and a strict parent. So a lot of us in a crisis, we take the approach of trying to sort of comfort and support. And we might say, oh, it's okay, you're late. Oh, it's okay, you missed that deadline. You missed it because your child was running around with scissors. And I mean, it's okay to be tolerant, but at the same time, we need to be very careful that we don't push people into a learned helplessness trap where people don't feel that they can control their own destiny. So the practical implication here, when you think of this as a leader, is to show people that you care, but you also want to provide some clear directions. And to be honest, at this point in time, what's called for is actually a little less compassion and more containment, because we've all heard all the soothing words now, oh, we are all in this together, and people are fed up with that. So we need to recognize specific actions now. What people crave right now is plans. What do we do now? What will we do when, half of our team, when they have got the vaccine and we still haven't? So you need to be crystal clear about expectations and structure, because that provides safety too, at least in my experience with the leaders that I work with.
Yeah, and that's really about a roadmap, isn't it? That's about saying, exactly, this is where we're going. Things are changing. Don't be late for that Zoom call again, because we all need to take the company to a certain place, and this is how we're going to get there.
So building on that, Justin, what people really appreciate right now, I have a leader who says, so we want to be done 10 minutes before we're supposed to be done. And people are just so grateful for that. An extra 10 minutes. I mean, what can you do with 10 minutes? You can almost do a little yoga exercise. You can pick up some fresh water. You can, maybe just give someone something to think about, or there's so much to do in those 10 minutes. So time is so important right now, that we really respect each other's time.
And that, even as a small tip for a leader, that really is actually quite powerful, because not only is it energizing, but also it's allowing people a little bit of time between their meetings, because we all know that some people have got this tyranny of Zoom calls, back-to-back Zoom calls all day. Mentally, that's exhausting. And then especially when you've got kids, who need their lunch making that, you're not used to doing during the day, or, they need help with algebra. Well, my kids get no help from algebra for me, I'll tell you. But
No, but that's true. I mean, I had a leader the other day who we were in a team session, and then this child came in with a waterproof marker in, I mean, his entire face. And it's just, so this happens, I mean, all the time. We need to, of course, with families working from home, when you're homeschooling at the same time, it is really, really hard and stressful for them. And of course, we need to cut them some extra slack and make sure that we keep understanding, and at the same time also help them with their jobs, right? Because we don't want them to give up, and we want them to stay in this also after this pandemic.
Absolutely. Well, there's a good tip for all the leaders out there. Finish your Zoom minutes 10 minutes beforehand and give everybody a bit of a break. The third point that you made in terms of dealing with the challenges today was energize everyone every day.
So, I mean, at one point, I was just so surprised to see how much the burden of keeping up energy fell on the individual person. It was sort of all about find your own mental balance. What can you do to bootstrap yourself? So I found time and time again that the most effective advice is actually to try and create a culture where you also energize others. So when I learned from the Lego group that this was part of their leadership culture, I found it, very inspiring to energize everyone every day. And this sounds so easy, right? But even though, and this is a cliche that, you should put on your own oxygen mask first, it's true. And just to be really practical, Justin, so you could do this right after our conversation today. I mean, you can go out and energize 3 people around you. And I can't tell you what to do, because I'm sure you know how. It could be, giving someone some feedback. It could be, a new deadline that you're working on. It could be, that you decide, how can you make it your personal mission to energize at least 3 people. And that will have a viral effect if all of us decide to energize a few people around us every day. And I usually say to the leaders, that I work with, try to make sure that the first person you call in the morning, you want to make sure to energize them. You want, to leave them on a high from that conversation. So that's at least part of this energy. But I will also say that talking about energy and making energy flow, that there are, of course, many other ways to energize, sharing success stories, setting up competitions, dividing long-term projects into sprints, but also, to talk about exercise, to take walks together, to make sure, oh, you told me last Tuesday that you wanted to go for a run every day. Did you do it? Tell me about it. It's important as ever to find, your own sort of sanctuaries in all of this. What gives you pure joy and energy to do? Because sometimes, those things are the first things that we give up under pressure. We consider them a luxury and not a necessity. So just when we need them the most, we stop doing it. I'm too busy to go for a run. You don't know how many times I've heard that sentence recently. But it's so important for energy that we continue our exercise.
And these lessons and the experiences that leaders are having right now in this, unprecedented pandemic, how do you think that is going to benefit business going forward? Once we're out of this, once we get our vaccines, and once we're out of this in the second half of, let's say, or the third quarter or fourth quarter of this year, what are the lessons do you think that leaders will have learnt from this pandemic, and how can they take that forward to a post-pandemic world?
I'm very inspired by Brené Brown and her research on vulnerability and how vulnerability actually helps us perform. So I think one of the lessons that I've seen leaders really, take in is that discomfort is important, because for all of us, this pandemic, it's a first timer for all of us. So we need to be able to to take this in, to take the perspectives here, to reality check ourselves. I think many of the leaders that I coach, they have learned so much about themselves. They have also learned that they are much stronger than they thought they were, that they could actually handle this. They also learned another thing, and that is that you can't do this alone. So, I mean, if you are one of those leaders that, you think that you can go in and you're just the A team and, other leaders, they need to sleep, but I don't. I mean, that's a huge mistake. So I would say that the leaders I've seen manage best during this crisis, they know when to go home and rest, or they know that, okay, so now it's time for my second in command to take over and leave me time to rest a bit and to get a bit of dinner, and then I'm ready again. Because otherwise, if you communicate all the time and if you're in the battle all the time, then you are not your best self. So you need a bit of a break. And this is something that, of course, in the military, in NATO units, this is something that we teach officers. As a business leader, I'm sure many business leaders, they haven't, tried this before, where they had to be on call 24/7. We can do this for a couple of weeks, but after that, we need to take breaks.
And do you think these new behaviours that leaders are starting to apply now, and we're talking mainly about big businesses now, big media companies, do you think they're going to be better places to work after the pandemic?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think so. And for many reasons, because we have all had this huge learning experience. So we've learned so many new routines. We are wiser. We know so much more about our own emotional reactions and about how others react and how different these reactions are. So what people are really craving right now in large organizations, and this is also what I hear from the media industry, is, new ideas. And hopefully when the wheels start turning again, I'm sure that, there'll be a bunch of new ideas and a bit of an explosion even, because some of us has been, we've been waiting a little bit and maybe, sitting there thinking, okay, so hopefully inspiration will come to me, but inspiration will come to all of us when we start to see our colleagues again and engage in new ways. So I'm sure there'll be many new ideas after this pandemic as well.
We're all looking forward to the TV industry's roaring 20s that's hopefully coming up.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Hope to speak to you again very soon.
Thank you, Justin, and keep safe.
My next guest on this week's TellyCast is Lucy Smith, the newly appointed Director of MIPCOM as well as MIPTV at Reed Midem. Welcome to TellyCast, Lucy.
Hi, thank you, Justin. It's great to be here with you today.
Congratulations on your new role.
Well, thank you. Before I tell you about it, I just wanted to say something, actually, Justin, which is about kind of TellyCast, really. I've really started following right from the beginning, so it kind of feels like I've been able to follow the different, TV execs that you've had on the show throughout the last almost a year now. So sort of taking the temperature on people, what their feelings were about MIPTV and MIPCOM. We've been a bit on the same sort of journey, starting work from home, learning about teams, homeschooling, MIPTV being cancelled.
Yeah.
Goodness me. Anyway, so I just wanted to say I really appreciated going on the journey with you guys, and it's been good.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Well, it has been a year like no other, really. This is the 46th episode. Yeah, we've been all around the world talking to lots of different execs, and hopefully we're going to go and talk to a lot more in the future. So it's fantastic looking forward now to MIPTV in the not too distant future. So before we come on to that, can you just expand a little bit on your new responsibilities in your new role?
Yeah, absolutely, with pleasure. First of all, I guess I'd like to just say, I had the pleasure of working with Loreen Garrod at MIP for over 10 years. We had a great, relationship and worked very closely together. So there's a lot of things that will be, in continuity. Back to your question, I'm taking over as show director for MIPCOM as well as MIPTV. And I have to say I'm really looking forward to the challenge and the excitement that will be part of, running the world's biggest entertainment content market in Cannes. So very excited about that. And of course, we already have, an amazing team who's in place who will continue developing the shows.
Now, you must have learned a lot about TV in the, I think, 15 years, is it, since you've been at Reed Midem, and in the TV division since 2009.
Correct. It's a bit. Yes. Thank you for reminding me of that. I have. I've been part of the division for quite a while, and I think that's what is going to be very useful for me, is because I started off by running all of the conference and content side of the MIP markets, which was a great way to build the network and to really understand and stay informed about the industry, because as we all know. It's all about, understanding what's happening. It's about talking and listening to clients, understanding what the new needs are going to be, just to make sure that, the markets will continue to, serve the industry's needs as best, as they should. And I think the most recent experience, obviously I brought to that was having spearheaded the transformation of MIPTV last year, which obviously the big frustration was it didn't actually happen. But yeah, there's been a lot of changes in the industry, as we know, over the last year and years. And we're going to have, we'll be looking at that and taking all the learnings. The importance of the streaming part of the business is absolutely key, and all of those new business models. And of course, the impact of the pandemic on everything and everyone. So yeah, lots of challenges, and hopefully I'll be bringing a lot of great experience to the new role.
And nothing's changed more, I suppose, than the challenges that live events have faced and markets have faced in the last year. But in terms of your approach to MIPTV and MIPCOM, how would you say it will differ from Lorene's?
Well, I think, we're not the same people, so we won't have the same, approach. But I do think that the main thing to really sort of think about is that the job is going to be very different, because we're coming into this now, coming out of this major pandemic, and at a time when the industry has transformed so rapidly, and all of the changes that were happening were just accelerated. So I think, I'll be bringing that experience of understanding and really staying on top of what's going on, and using the relationships and working very closely with the clients and getting the feedback as we go along, and as we all sort of steer our path to the future of MIPCOM and MIPTV.
Now, coming to this year's virtual MIPTV, which is scheduled for the 12th to the 16th of April, why should delegates attend the event this year?
Delegates should really be attending MIPTV. It is the most anticipated week each spring for the global TV industry, and it's been almost 60 years. 58th MIPTV is coming up, so there's a real need to maintain the MIPTV week, and that's what we've really learned. It's the importance of giving that moment in time so the industry can come together and really focus on doing business. So what we were, as we were looking at, as we made the decision that MIPTV really had to be held entirely online this April, we looked at our experience over the year, and we made the decision that we should bring the international community together around a week of one-to-one pre-scheduled matchmaking meetings, along with the speed networking conferences, and really giving people access to new buyers and commissioners and helping them to have a very efficient experience. So there's really there's 3 different ways to take part at MIPTV. There'll be the one-to-one distribution market, which will address all genres. So that's across doc, factual, drama, and kids, and that's really the heart of a MIP market. So, as I said, we'll be giving the distributors access to new buyers, as well as some of the buyers they already know. There's the second offer is a one-to-one co-production and development forum, and that's focusing on the unscripted side. Now, as you probably know, we have brought MIPDoc and MIP formats into the heart of MIPTV. So we're really focusing on, giving producers the opportunity to bring new projects to the show, and they'll be able to meet with buyers, commissioners, distributors, other producers, and basically funding partners. And then the third way to take part is just kind of as a delegate. So it's access to the platform with a digital pass, and that gives all of the clients will be able to come together for open networking, speed meetings, and of course, the conference program, which is always very important at MIP. They get access to fresh TV and other, market intelligence. Everything we do is going to be focused on trying to give people ways to meet and discover new partners. So that's the digital pass. And one other aspect is for the buyers, we're inviting key drama buyers to attend the 7th MIP drama screenings, which we've had some great entries for. So that's going to be pretty exciting too.
Can you take us through the highlights? Are there any exclusive news that you can give us about MIPTV this year?
Yes, I can actually, which is good. We've got, there'll always be, some great highlights happening at a MIPTV event. And this year we'll be putting on the second MIP SDG Award, which is in support of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We developed this actually for last MIPTV in partnership with United Nations. We've been talking to them for a long time about finding a way to help really support the Sustainable Development Goals. And this year, MIP is awarding A&E Network's president, Paul Buccieri, with the award for reducing inequality, which is the UN goal number 10. A&E has got multiple internal and external initiatives around, reducing equality, and they really have been a fantastic partner for us at the MIP Markets. We created the Women in Global Entertainment Power Lunch together, and the next MIPCOM will actually be the 10th anniversary. And we've lived some really powerful moments during those lunches that we've been lucky enough to have in Cannes for the most part with, for example, just recent events. There was the discussion with the producers and the victims of the Peabody Award-winning documentary Surviving R. Kelly. And I remember very vividly when we had Catherine Zeta-Jones come to the lunch, and it was just after the Harvey Weinstein scandal had covered the front pages, and talking very early on about the Me Too movement. And there were a lot of really, meaningful conversations happening in that room around the table. So they've been a really great partner. And the other area is on the diversity side. We've had at MIPCOM, we organised the fourth Diversified TV Excellence Awards, and A&E have always been a founding partner on that. I mean, it's an area that I'm very passionate about, as was Loreen. And I do believe that it's very important for us at the MIP Markets to offer a platform to help give the industry a way to show the support of social change.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I think it's really important, coalescing around an event that is, really taking those sustainability issues seriously and taking them forward, which I think everybody realizes in the industry that we have to really make an effort to push for that change.
Absolutely.
You mentioned earlier on, we talked about some initial new plans that you sketched out for the new live MIPTV before COVID-19 hit. What does the pandemic mean for the future reinvention of MIPTV once we start to come back into the real world, if you like?
Well, the most important thing that I'd like to say up top on that is that we will be back in Cannes next April. We do really sort of believe that MIPTV's importance as an industry event will become even more so as we see that people's behaviour will have changed. There was potentially less travel, due to also the carbon footprint that we're all very aware of. And MIPTV offers very much a sort of one-stop shop for the industry to come together. But if we talk a little bit about what we were doing for last MIPTV, before COVID hit and we had to cancel. We were in the process of this transformation, and that was really based on the results of talking to the industry through some research that we carried out and conversations that we had. And we listened, and we did work on finding ways to offer clients a more sort of efficient and cost-effective way to take part in MIPTV, give them a way to have a different presence than they had necessarily at MIPCOM. We also know that the world has changed beyond recognition now. So we do need to go back to our clients and start those conversations up again so that we can design, the market that really does sort of meet their future needs. So I can't sort of tell you what it will be, but I can tell you we'll be back in Cannes next April.
Reed Midem's a huge event company. You run hundreds of events a year in music and property and various other sectors outside TV and the content industry. What's Reed Midem learned from a year of digital events?
We've learned a lot. The first thing, though, I would like to say is we've learned the importance of physical markets and face-to-face and being in Cannes. I don't think I've ever heard so many people talking about, the desire for a glass of rosé in Cannes, or walking along the Croisette and bumping into, people they want to meet with. But yeah, I mean, more seriously, I think we have learned a lot. We were the first to deliver, with MIPTV digital markets at scale, with 5,000 participants online at MIPTV, another 6,000 plus for MIPCOM. And now we're bringing those learnings together to MIPTV. We also ran MIP China online, which was with pre-scheduled meetings, and also MIP Cancun in November. So we've taken the learnings from those events, as well as having the group. We're part of Reed Exhibitions, and there's more than 400 events around the world. So we have a big community, and we share a lot of information on the different digital initiatives, so we can use that common knowledge to improve the experience. And we do believe that digital is going to be a big part of the future, alongside the physical markets, even when we do get back to more physical markets. We're investing heavily in digital as a complement to the physical markets, and all of them will be augmented digitally in some way from now on. We think that this will help to provide better experiences, whether it be face to face, because it does help you to better prepare a market, or virtually. Because the digital also offers access to a much wider audience. So there's lots of opportunities, and we're really looking in depth at what they are, and how we can really work with the industry on putting on more sort of digital features and facilities for them. So we can expect blended events, if you like, going forward. Yeah, I think that it's really about how digital can really augment the experience. But we do also know that the physical face-to-face is going to be absolutely key, but digital will just improve the experience. There's many different ways to look at that. Now, looking ahead to MIPCOM in October, and I realise it probably feels like a long way away, and we're all hoping, finally we're thinking that is probably the first real-world major event in the TV industry that we can get back to and meet each other face to face. Can delegates expect a relative return to normal at MIPCOM in October? I think, let's say that we're very optimistic, of course. In the same way, I think we're all, desperate to get back to Cannes. We're working very closely with our clients on MIPCOM already. So it sounds early, but to be honest, it's, the planning is already very much underway, and there's already, over 100 sort of exhibitors already, signed up. So there's a lot happening. It's really it's feeling very real to us. Cannes really does sort of mean something to everyone. Outside of Hollywood, it's the red carpet capital of the world, and that's what we are gearing up towards for MIPCOM. And just last week, actually, Cannes Series did announce that they wouldn't be taking place in April physically, where they had originally planned to be alongside MIPTV. So they will be in Cannes with us at MIPCOM, which will make it, even more the biggest entertainment event of the year. So, for us, we're hoping that the rollout of the vaccination programs will have the impact, that we're all hoping for. It's clear that there's a lot of demand and a lot of desire to go back. But alongside that, of course, we are extremely focused on everything regarding health and safety. And, it's a little early to know exactly what those measures will be, but we're working along with our partners in Cannes and, with the Palais, and of course with our group on how we best put on safely an event in this sort of new normal that you mentioned earlier, Justin. So I think that back to normal, it'll be a new normal, but back to Cannes will be the main thing.
It's obviously really difficult to predict right now, but taking the UK as an example, the government here is racing to vaccinate the whole adult population, we believe, by autumn or starting in autumn. Obviously, this is differing country by country across the EU and across the wider world. Just thinking about the practicalities, will MIPCOM attendees need to prove they've been vaccinated to gain entry to the Palais, for example?
Right. Clearly, there's going to be, protocols in place from the group about, how we organise MIPCOM, but it's way too early to talk about that right now. We know that the biggest barrier is going to be around international travel. As I said, we're following the vaccination, programs everywhere, and I think there's a lot of hope that they're going to be in place this summer. So I think that, it's something that we need to come back to a little bit later in the year. I'd be very happy to come back and talk to you about it, Justin, but I think that it's just a bit too early for us to know exactly what the, new protocols are going to be.
And now it's time for Story of the Week, where my guests get to highlight the TV industry news story that's caught their eye in the past 7 days. Lucy, what's your story of the week?
My story of the week is actually from C21 last week, and it's about the global non-profit organisation Doc Society. They've launched the Climate Story Fund, giving filmmakers grants for projects tackling the climate crisis. And I just thought that, this really is the most important sort of subject of our lives right now. So giving creators funds and access to experts, because that's also part of this, to help them create stories to support the climate crisis. I just think that's hugely important, and it kind of struck me.
Once we're actually out of what's right in front of us now, the pandemic, the real big issue is the year of Glasgow, a huge summit coming up later this year in Glasgow that's obviously going to set the agenda, hopefully, for real change around climate change for the whole world. So let's keep our fingers crossed for that. But no, that's obviously a very timely story.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Every week, I ask my guests to nominate their hero of the week and who or what they want to get in the bin. Lucy, who's your hero of the week?
My hero of the week is Michelle Obama. I'm a big fan of Michelle Obama, and I thought she did a lot of, great work as a First Lady, and she's a real sort of inspiration. And this story is about her, with her new production company, along with Barack Obama, Higher Ground Productions. They're creating a new kids series, all going to be helping kids in healthy eating. And I thought that was, a lovely story. And so she is my hero of the week.
And who or what are you telling to get in the bin?
Okay, so this is a bit sort of double-edged, because I'm actually putting in the bin the Golden Globes voters for not having nominated Michaela Coel's, her and her amazing series, I May Destroy You. I thought, her series was just incredible and important, and she, absolutely deserved her place there. But I do know that they did nominate for the first time 3 female directors, which was a good thing. So I can't put them totally in the bin, but half in the bin. But yeah, disappointment about Michaela Cole.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that seemed to be a rather large snub, and I think that everybody's been talking about that on social media over the last few days. Lucy, thank you so much for coming on TellyCast and telling us all about MIPTV and how you're going to be approaching MIPCOM later this year. I look forward to sharing a glass of rosé in the Palais with you in October.
Thank you very much, Justin. I look forward to that too, and I'm sure we will. It's a date.
Now, my final guest on this week's show is our regular wellbeing and career coach, Tracy Forsyth. Welcome again to the show, Tracy.
Thank you, Justin. Lovely to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on. This week, we're going to be talking a little about the other end. We spoke earlier on in the show about leadership, but you've seen something in the press that you wanted to share and some thoughts about maybe leadership from the other side of the fence.
Yes, exactly. What I want to talk about today is how do we go about demanding with difficult, demanding bosses? And the reason that came to mind was that at the weekend, I saw a newspaper article about the Australian Open, and there's a Russian tennis player called Daniil Medvedev, and he was losing his match, and he started yelling at his coach. His coach was sitting in the box nearby. And eventually the coach, he just picked up his bag and walked out. It really sort of piqued my interest that that this coach had just walked off because he was being yelled at. And it made me question, actually in my career and other people's careers, what would they do if they were being yelled at and if that person yelling at them was their boss? So I posted a poll on my Instagram stories and asked, okay, would you walk out if you were being yelled at work and if the person doing the yelling was your boss? And I was so surprised because only 40% said that they would go, which meant 60% say that he would stay with the yelling boss.
Wow.
Yeah, so today I just wanted to focus on what to do, because I think that means to me that many people either are used to it or feel that they have no choice. And it's really, really tricky, I think, dealing with a difficult, demanding boss. So I just wanted to talk about that today.
So 60% of people would put up with a boss that shouts at them. I wonder if the TV industry is, that's particularly a problem. I mean, we saw last week there was the piece about Gogglebox. I know Beck, who are now involved in that. This is all about reports of bullying behaviour on the set of Gogglebox. And I think we've heard lots of different reports over the years about similar incidents. Obviously, that's just an accusation. We don't know if that's been proven or not. But it's probably, quite a prevalent issue in such a creative industry. It's not excusing anything.
It's probably in every industry. I've been working now for 30 years. And I suppose when I started, I'm not sure about yelling. Well, I did have a boss who would come out the door and yell at everybody, and nobody would bat an eyelid, certainly more in the sort of news, current affairs, that kind of area. It was less common in features and fact end. Anybody who's working in television, especially if you've worked with contributors or on-screen talent, will probably know what it's like to work with demanding talent. I think people in television are very adept at getting things done and moving around the mountain rather than trying to go through it. There are all kinds of ways that I think you can deal with it. Whether they are right or wrong, that's the discussion. So in my time, I think, when I think of the demanding bosses that I've had, some have been brilliant. They've just had high standards, et cetera, et cetera. But some, are difficult, demanding bosses. So some of the ways that I thought are, well, you can become a yes man or a yes woman, so if they say jump, you say how high. But seriously, how tiring is that? The issue there is that you're just living in fear and living like a little jumping robot. In many cases, it's a matter of survival, isn't it? You have to do a job to earn money, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't always have the choice about, well, there's always a choice, but it's not an easy choice. So you could become a yes man. I mean, I think the other thing that I've tried in my day, this is with on-screen talent and bosses, is flattery. So that's not quite, I'm not sure I've gone as far as telling my boss that I thought they looked particularly beautiful or handsome that day. But certainly that that whole thing about making them think it's their idea, if it's a good idea, that is a form of sort of flattery, isn't it? If you want to get something done and you've got a difficult boss, there are ways and means of making them think it's their idea. So suddenly they like the idea.
That's called managing upwards, I think, isn't it?
That's managing upwards. Okay. So that might be more common than I think. The other thing that I learned pretty early on, that when it came to on-screen talent, and I guess the sort of bosses or people above me, was that it pays to make them look good. So for example, there was a presenter that I worked with who was very, very heavily involved in the scripting of the series. And you had to go and see this presenter before you went out and shot your item. And this presenter would go through your script, there were bits in the studio, there were bits on location. And I soon learned that if I was giving all the best lines to the presenter on location rather than this presenter in studio, there would be a big red line through it. So I quickly learned to give all the best lines, the best punchline, the juiciest stuff to the main presenter who was going to be in the studio, because, of course, they wanted to look good. They wanted to have the best lines. And, it was not a bad idea because it meant that your stuff got kept in. And to be fair, this presenter was very, very good at what they did. And they probably did have a greater impact if they got the best or the juiciest bits. So that's one thing, is just make sure. And that goes for all your bosses. If you're helping them with a big presentation or you're feeding into a big piece of work, it's like it is in your interest if they also look good. Hopefully you will work with a boss who is generous of spirit, who also credits you for your work.
It isn't a boss that shouts and behaves poorly like that. Isn't that a sign of weakness, though?
Listen, nowadays it's completely unacceptable. And if it's still going on, there are going to be many more people agreeing with you that that's not the way it should be. Again, 30 years ago, I think nobody would have batted an eyelid. But the other thing I think on that point, is I think you raise a good point there, Justin, because often it's not personal to you. It may be the situation and their frustration coming out rather than anything to do with you. And obviously a good way of sensing that is that you won't be the only one that they're behaving badly to, right? So, if you can, it's very difficult when you're in there and that, the abuse of power, and if somebody's very high up and you're very low down, etc., it's very difficult to have that perspective. But if possible, try not to take it personally and think, well, is it more about them, probably, than it is about me? So keep a level head if possible. Don't suffer in silence, definitely. Share what's going on with your loved ones and your friends. And obviously, if it gets into a bullying situation and is affecting your mental health, then, there are all kinds of procedures that have to be taken place. If it is a sort of, a demanding boss rather than a necessarily a difficult one, then I think what really helps is to be proactive and think one step ahead of what they are thinking. It's like anticipate what they are going to ask you. Stay one step ahead. So that old saying, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. It is true. It's tempting when you're trying to figure something out, and I've been guilty of it, is going to my bosses in the past going, well, this is the situation and I've done this and I've done that and I've tried this, but only for them to say, well, so what's the answer then? What's your solution? So always think solutions rather than problems. And when I was having to present to the board big official business cases, the advice top down was always come to us with options and a recommendation. Your boss may well want you to do all the legwork and all the thinking. That's why you're there. And come up with the different options, the sort of pros and cons, and what you think is the best way forward. They may not go with that recommendation, but at least they will see the thinking and the reasoning easily laid out. And so sort of like, I guess that's sort of top-down thinking, is think of it from their point of view. And also, what I think is a really good thing is if you are a line manager yourself and you complain about the people who report to you because they are bringing you problems, not solutions, et cetera, just ask yourself, am I guilty of that at all? I know I have been in the past. I guess my penultimate point is to remember you are there to do a job. You have been hired for your expertise, which your boss doesn't necessarily have. So they may need you as much as you need them. So there should be, I don't care what kind of the hierarchy is, there should be a mutual respect there. Productions, for example, wouldn't happen without the runner. It wouldn't happen without the floor manager. It wouldn't happen. It doesn't matter what role you're in. You are there to do a particular role. And even though somebody might be the boss, their job is to be a good boss and to have a clarity of vision and a clarity of strategy and to make sure it all happens. Your job is to do your thing. So even though they may be more experienced than you and on a different level to you, there should be that mutual respect that you are there to do your jobs. And my last point is really to know your line in the sand. What is your walk away point? It's like that coach in the Open. It's like he obviously felt that his tennis star, whatever, had crossed a line. He simply packed up his bags and then he left. So it's not an easy choice to make often, if you're there because you want the experience or you need the paycheck, etc., but know your line in the sand. And obviously, if it is something that you would classify as bullying, that's a whole different conversation. So this is what we've talked about today is really if you've got a demanding, difficult boss, not necessarily a bully. If it's a bully, then that's a whole different conversation.
It's perhaps more difficult for freelancers as well, particularly in the current climate, isn't it? When to draw that line in the sand when you may be throwing away a week's worth of work.
It's definitely not easy. And I've worked most of my life as a freelancer and then in a big corporate. And it is not easy because you are living from job to job. I think in television, whatever, there are now, unfortunately, starting to be companies that are known as not good places to work, or there are certainly becoming people who are being exposed as bad bosses, etc., which is great, isn't it? And
yeah, it is.
It's not great that they're there, but it's great that people are kind of forewarned. It's not an easy choice to make. It's make sure that you are making a conscious choice about taking on a role like that. And I think it's always that kind of thing, like, what is your line in the sand? You have to be, to thine own self be true. It's not always an easy choice.
Speaking personally, I've done it a couple of times in the sense that I've resigned a client because of how they've behaved on the phone, particularly shouting, actually. Yeah, it's something that you never want to turn down business, but actually when you do it, you do feel a lot better actually for it, even though there might be a bit of short-term pain, but actually in the long term, you can look at yourself and say, actually, I'm really glad I did that and I feel good about myself.
Yes, and I think that's right. I think it's like, if you make a choice, what does it cost you? What does it cost you? What is is the monetary gain worth the whatever the emotional toll or the just the misery of actually doing the job? What are your options? And be true to yourself.
It feels to me like a bit of a hangover, really, from the 80s and 90s, and and the last decade as well. And hopefully, a lot of these bosses who felt that they could behave however they wanted, maybe they are starting to be retired over the next few years, and this is going to be part of the leveling up that we're hopefully going to see.
I think some of those people may not be self-aware enough to know that they are being like that. Maybe that's letting them off the hook. But I think if they've grown up in those environments, they just think that's what leadership is, and it's not.
Tracy, thanks so much again for coming on the show, and we'll put a link to Fast Track to Fearless in the episode description where everybody can find out a lot more about your training and leadership courses.
Brilliant. Thank you, Justin.
Well, we've reached the end of another week's show. As always, thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to TellyCast and share it with friends and colleagues. This week's show is sponsored by MIPTV, who passionately create and share content for the experienced generation. Channel provider, content producer, distributor and format seller, MIPTV delivers real-world stories about the adventures, cultural trends and social causes that resonate with today's millennial and Gen Z audiences. Based upon and inspired by social media trends and influencers, MIPTV operates and distributes a flagship lifestyle channel in vivid 4K UHD HDR quality to 315 million homes in 46 countries via linear cable platforms, digital smart TVs, OTT services and via watchinsight.tv. It also distributes a mobile-first short-form channel in Short, action sports channel in Trouble, science and tech channel in Wonder, and a nature and wildlife channel in Wild, a co-venture with Off the Fence, to fast channels and mobile services around the world. Insight TV partners with global brands and broadcasters such as Red Bull Media House, G2 Esports, Vice Media and BT Sports to create factual series like Epic Exploring, I Am Invincible and Ultimate Goal. To find out how to do great things together with Insight TV, visit insight.tv or get in touch with the team at marketing@insight.tv. And a quick reminder to sign up for our new free newsletter called TellyCast Plus. It's packed with interesting TV industry stories of the week you may have missed, exclusive insight and opinion, including the secret producer, our intrepid anonymous exec reporting from the front line of TV production. It's all completely free. Just visit our website to sign up at telecast-podcast.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter. TellyCast was edited by Ian Chambers and recorded in Lockdown 3 in London. Until next Thursday, as always, stay safe.